Software Showcase, live streaming to you from the sunny campus of Wycliffe Associates in Orlando, Florida. It's actually not that sunny today, Glenn. I am Mark Stedman, Vice President of Information Technology, and joining me today in the studio, as always, is Glenn Oliver, our team's project manager and all-around great guy. Glenn, it's nice to see you.
Oh, thank you so much for the introductions. It's been so long. I feel like everyone needs to be reintroduced to us.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think it's been about a quarter since we've been in here.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, the interesting thing is, last time we left teasing Orature. We had just shown a little bit of the new features, Orature 1.0.
We did.
And we said, hey, we can't wait till we get back to you and tell you a little bit more about it. It's finally here.
Yeah, well, we've been busy.
Yeah, that is very true.
I teased you about whether you were on vacation the last 3 months, but the reality is none of us have been on vacation the last 3 months. We've all been working like crazy.
Indeed. So let's talk a little bit about what we want to show today.
Yeah.
So last time, like I said, we showed off 1.0 and some of the features, but this time I kind of wanted to dive in and actually show Orature in use. We've seen a little bit of Orature being used as narration in our demos, but it actually, even though we'll be looking at a version coming this summer that will include all of the features of Mast for being able to draft and things like that, you can even use Orature for translation today.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into it, I just thought I'd give you a chance to talk a little bit about what we have been working on the last few months. You and a bunch of our volunteers have been here. What have you guys been working on, kind of QAing Orature and all that?
That's right. It's one of my favorite seasons. So we have some wonderful volunteers. It would take me probably about 7 minutes to go through all the names.
Yeah, that's right.
But we have a number of them that are dedicated toward helping us refresh the ULB. So the ULB has been recorded in 2015, I want to say. We started that project. It took us a couple years, I want to say about 2.5 years to complete that.
Yeah.
And since then, the ULB has gradually had little changes, usually just phrases and things like that, because like any Bible, when you flip to the front of it, right, there's a little copyright there because they do new revisions.
Right.
It's a living language like anything else. And so this year, we've had the opportunity to refresh it. There's been enough little changes that we thought there's starting to be a slight divergence between the text and what we had a snapshot back then. And so they've been helping us do that. And something that took us 2.5 years to accomplish, this time through Orature, it looks like we're going to be done.
Yeah.
This season, one winter season.
One winter season, yeah.
It's really incredible. And we've had probably about 20 different volunteers contributing their time, both in the narration, the checking, the redoing. We've had some in the seat that David takes today as a sound engineer.
That's right.
And behind the mic, all kind of roles. And I can't thank them enough. I really appreciate their time.
Yeah, very much so. Let's talk a little bit about why we're recording the Unlocked Literal Bible. It's an English Bible. Why would we want to have that as an audio option?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Well, remember when I was talking about that front of the Bible, when we look down and we see all those little numbers? Well, you'll also see copyright information, which is great. I mean, I want to make sure that I'm buying a legal copy in the country I'm resident, but if I was to go to a different country or try to use that as a source, well, now I'm kind of running into some legitimate copyright problems. And so WA, Wycliffe Associates, sought to solve that problem by creating a version of the Bible, the scripture, that is copyright free, sometimes known as copyright left as opposed to copyright. And so this allows other people to use this source all across the world to use and draft their translations.
Yeah. Which is a great explanation for why the ULB. Why an audio ULB? Why don't we just use the written version?
Another great question. So as we encounter different people groups, sometimes we'll find groups of people that they do have a written language, but there might not be a high literacy rate. Most people prefer to just dialogue. They don't read or they don't write. They can still conduct business every day and speak in their tongues. And so they have a preference for consuming the Bible orally. And so therefore, if we're utilizing in the church-owned Bible translation process, we're going to encounter more of those people in availability that it's more natural to be able to do translation from oral to oral. And then, of course, there's some languages that just do not have a written language. It's just no-go from start. And so we need to be able to accommodate those languages translating from our gateway languages, the language in which they do business during the day, into that language that they speak at home.
That's right. So the reason that we're recording gateway languages is that we use them as source audio for downtrack oral Bible translations. That was actually the softballs I was trying to throw at you, was to get you to give that answer.
Missed
so
it.
I'll just give it myself. So the point of the narration of the English Bible is that languages where you have a speaker who speaks English and also a heart language can use that to listen to Scripture and then think about how they would say it in their own language and then record that. And that's really sort of the very short overview of how oral Bible translation works. So we're in the process of recording all of the gateway languages, and it's a narration. So all of the gateway languages are written, except I think for one maybe. And so those will be narrated by people like our volunteers this winter. We'll read those down chapter by chapter. We'll record those, put in the verse markers, make those available for the global church to translate from.
Right. And also I implied, the software has helped us increase our capability to do that, but also it's a necessary helper aid as well. So you might ask, well, I could just have somebody read the Bible to me, and that's absolutely true. I've seen that done.
Yep.
But with the software, it's pre-recorded, and I can do it as slow as I want to consume, or maybe I've had you read the same passage a couple times, and frankly, I'm embarrassed that it's Mark's accent. I can't quite follow it, but I don't want to offend him. But this allows me to listen to it consume it at my rate, and as often as I need to, so I get it. So it locks in there and allows me to actually translate a little bit easier.
Yeah, it helps the translators be able to work independently without each one needing their own facilitator.
Yes, exactly.
Well, rather than continuing to talk about Orature, why don't we show Orature? So who's joining us in the studio today?
So we have a guest via Teams. This is Tony. He's actually pre-recorded some of this. So we're going to do something a little bit different, which is while he's doing his demo, we'll be rude and talk over it a little bit to kind of give context to what he's doing, and also maybe pause once in a while. So this might be a good point to point out that if you have questions as this is going or anything we're talking about, look for that question channel in the Teams channel and put your question there, and we'll make sure to provide some space at the end to come back and try to answer some of those. So I'd like to introduce Tony Tranh. Well, actually, you know what? He can introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Tony and I am one of the software developer of Orature, and today I would like to show you how I would use Orature to translate a chapter in the Bible from English to Vietnamese.
So notable here that Tony's actually from Vietnam. He came to us from Vietnam. He was a student here in the States, came into our internship program, and we haven't been able to get rid of him yet. We're so grateful to have him on our team. And he's recently actually gone back to school. He's working on a master's degree.
Yep.
And so is able to still be a part of our team while he is studying for his master's degree.
Exactly. Actually, the opposite is true in that we couldn't let him go. We didn't want to let him go. So he wanted to go to graduate school, and we said, fantastic, and keep going with this. That'll be great. All right,
working,
fantastic.
keep working,
so actually, he's here. You can actually continue rolling for just a moment. He's on what we call the project screen. So he's telling Orature, by the way, I want to start with English as my source language, what I want to listen to, what I want to read, and I want to make this translation into Vietnamese. And then once he's told Orature about that, then he's going to select the project, right? And that he's going to go to Psalms today. So when I refer to a project, I'm really talking about a book of the Bible in a particular source target combination.
That's right.
So he's going to open up Psalms here. And we know Psalms as Psalm 1, Psalm 2, but the software thinks of it as chapters, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an easy translation here. So he's going to go to Psalm, I think, 121.
Oh man, I'm so glad he's not going to do the entire book while we're online today. It'd be a long show.
So if you pause here for just a moment, so he has the option here of a couple different tracks, and we're going to ask him to record Psalm 121 verse by verse today.
Right.
So fortunately, what that is he just has to look for the big yellow button that says begin translation, and it's going to walk him through verse by verse. So let's go ahead.
But before we go forward, I'll just make a comment. So this project is English to Vietnamese. So in this sort of faux translation process that we're doing here, this would be a translator who can read or speak English, which is why the user interface is in English. But if we were going the other direction, what would the user interface language be?
Well, we have, you will notice that some of the text, if you switched to saying, let's say Vietnamese was my language, and I wanted to record in English, then all of the displayed text of the scripture would be, of course, in Vietnamese,
Right.
or whatever you chose. In addition to that, we showed last time that you could actually change the interface.
Right.
So all this text on the screen that's naturally in English would be in whatever language you chose.
Right.
And I think in the moment when we showed it last time, we maybe had 5 languages that you could do that, and it was growing. Ultimately, our goal is to have Orature in each of the gateway languages. So
Right,
that you
over
can,
30.
Yep.
Over 30. Okay, let's roll it.
So it's going to begin the translation. And you can see here that the text is in one part of the screen, but of course we're asking him to listen to the
I will
English
lift
verse.
up my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come?
So he would listen to that as
Tôi
often
sẽ ngước mắt
as he
nhìn
needed
lên
to,
núi. Sự
and
cứu
then
giúp của
begin
tôi đến
speaking
từ
it in
đâu?
his language.
That's right. And in reality, I'm going to pause it here. In reality, he would have listened to it more than once.
Right.
He would have spent some time digesting it. He would have spent some time thinking about how to express that. And then he would have done the recording.
Right.
Now, for the purposes of our Easy Bake demo, of course, he actually has the Vietnamese printed out on his desk there that he's reading from.
Mark, behind the scenes,
Well,
the magic.
I like to give the behind-the-scenes look,
Yes.
but that's why we wish that Bible translation was this fast and easy. But obviously, there's quite a bit more work that goes into considering how a verse would be said in your own language and expressing that and internalizing it and all of the steps of the math process.
And we'll see as we go along too. Right now he's doing one take at a time and only making, no mistakes. But
Right.
often it's the case that you'd probably do several takes until you yourself were satisfied with it
That's right.
and want to move on.
That's right. And the other notable thing was, he played the English there. That was recorded from our 2015 recording.
Peter Poloni.
Old Peter Poloni. We
fantastic.
miss that guy a
Great
lot.
voice.
Great guy. So that's what's going on there.
Yeah. And behind his picture, he's actually clicking a button that says next verse. So he's going to go from verse 1, and we see verse 2 is now on the screen. Once again, he's going to
My
play
help
the scripture
comes from
in English.
Yahweh, who made heaven and earth.
Sự cứu giúp tôi đến từ Đức Giê-hô-va.
Now,
Và đấng
if you
tạo
follow
dựng nên trời
that
đất.
line of the play source, you'll see that line ends actually in a little, what looks like kind of a watch. And that allows us, if we wanted to play back the English in a different speed rate, either faster or more likely slower.
That's right.
He will not allow your foot to slip. He who protects you will not slumber.
Ngài sẽ không để cho chân ngươi trượt ngã, đấng che chở ngươi sẽ không ngủ.
You want to say a little bit about the waveform that's going on the screen while he's recording?
Right. Actually, it's active more often than you'd think. Even
See,
before he
the
begins
guardian of
recording,
Israel
the
never
application is
slumbers
listening
or
to the
sleeps.
microphone and giving some feedback to
Đấng
the
bảo
user
vệ
to
của
let them know
Israel never
how loud
không-
they might
không
be.
ngủ.
So sometimes it might be too close to the mic or too far away. And then, as you were mentioning here, as he records, we can see the waveform being generated on the fly right away.
Yep.
See, the guardian of Israel
Now, the
never
good news is even if
slumbers
you
or
were very,
sleeps.
very quiet, the application
Đấng
can
bảo
hear
vệ
you and you'd be able to
Israel
play
không
it
bao
back.
giờ ngủ hay
But
chợp mắt.
in an event, we might actually work with the recorder. Now, you'll see here, he's actually made several takes. He heard himself make a mistake, so he went back and made a recording.
Yahweh is your
Another
guardian.
guideline that
Yahweh
often
is the
comes
shade
through is
at your
if you
right
make a
hand.
mistake, don't go back necessarily and just try to correct or edit
Đức
that thing.
Giê-hô-va là
Do a
đấng bảo
whole
vệ
new take.
ngươi.
We're not only
Đức
looking
Giê-hô-va
for
là bóng
accuracy,
che
but
bên
we're
tay
also
phải
looking
của
for that
ngươi.
naturalness to come through.
The sun will not harm you by day.
Now, one of the things that
nor
you're
the
probably
moon by
wondering
night.
here is, okay, so we do all the
Mặt trời
verses,
sẽ không
how
hại
do we
ngươi
end
lúc
up
ban
working
ngày,
with that?
mặt trăng cũng không hại ngươi lúc ban
And we'll
đêm.
see that once he's completed verses for the entire psalm, then we'll actually have the opportunity to work with it as a whole unit. We'll actually compile those together, and that'll kind of unlock some new features for us.
Yeah. I think this is the last verse, if I'm not mistaken.
Yahweh will protect you from all harm, and he will protect your
Now,
life.
essentially what he's doing here,
Đức Giê-hô-va
if
sẽ
we think
che
about a
chở ngươi
translation, he's creating a
khỏi
bunch of
mọi tổn
drafts.
hại và Ngài
He's
sẽ
only
bảo
listening
vệ
to it for himself.
mạng
So
sống
you'd actually
của
want
ngươi.
other people to listen, to comment, to give feedback, to come back and refine.
Đức Giê-hô-va sẽ
So in
che
a
chở
certain
ngươi
sense,
khỏi
what
mọi
he's
tổn
creating
hại
is
và Ngài sẽ bảo vệ
a draft.
mạng sống
Yeah,
right.
của ngươi.
Yep. So he's going to re-record verse 7 here. He must have heard something. That wasn't
Yahweh
quite right.
will protect you from all harm, and he will protect your life.
Maybe it was the famous dog in the background.
Đức Giê-hô-va sẽ bảo vệ ngươi khỏi mọi tổn hại và Ngài sẽ bảo vệ mạng sống của ngươi.
So he's got two takes there. Take
Yep.
one and take two.
And you'll notice that it actually selects the take that you did
Yahweh
last. It
will
actually promotes
protect
it. So if
you
we're
in all
watching
you
that,
do,
we'll see each
now
take has a
and
time code
forevermore.
associated with it.
Right.
And the last one done is promoted
Đức
all the way to the
Giê-hô-va
top.
sẽ che
And the
chở
program
cho
will
ngươi
actually
trong mọi việc ngươi
suggest
làm
that
từ
one,
nay
saying,
cho đến
hey, I'm
đời
assuming
đời.
since that was the last one you did, you're probably satisfied with that one.
Right.
And so if you're moving on and have multiple takes, it'll choose that. So why don't we pause here for just a moment. So even in what we're seeing here is that now, as we return to the screen, we see a lot of green dots.
That's right.
That indicates that there's actually a selected verse for all of those. We have some content, and we have something that we perhaps like. And then once we've done that, a new button has lit up beside the yellow button that we started out with. First of all, it no longer says begin translation, it says continue translation. So if I actually started it and I went back and came back, continue translation would allow me to pick up right where I left off.
Right.
But now I can actually take all of these individual verses and compile them together in a chapter. So it'll take the best of each of those verses there, stitch them together, and create one whole chapter for me. So let's roll and see that. So we'll see the view takes, that button on the left-hand side, a whole bunch of options just appeared. We now have a new take there that is the compilation of everything we just recorded. Okay. And what he's doing now is he's switching to Ocean Audio. And if we want to pause for just a moment. So we're about to show, what you saw is Orature doing the recording. We never had to leave the program, we did it right there. And you can do that for a verse or even the chapter. However, in certain circumstances, if you are a team working with your preferred software, if you want to use your own software because you're familiar or it's more powerful, has some features you really want, you can do that. You can partner that with Orature here. And we happen to use Ocean Audio, which is free, open source, and willing to share. So we often link to that when we suggest that. And what he'll be doing here next is actually recording an entire chapter, just so you can see how that can be used.
Okay.
So he just told Orature, by the way, please use this third-party program called Ocean Audio to record.
Yeah, and the main reason for using that would be that it has more features.
Absolutely.
Right. So
and
the
allows us
built-in-
to edit if we need to.
That's right. The baked-in recording functions that are within Orature are intentionally very, very simple. You can't do a lot with it. That's intentional. We want to keep it simple so that people don't get lost in all of the features. But we do have some users who are quite competent and technical and want to have that more powerful professional level recording interface. So that's what Ocean Audio gives you.
So he'll now record the chapter. We now see two different playback features. He's now, the third-party program has opened up, so he's going to basically take the two programs and put them side by side on the screen for his convenience, because now he can see all the text. He can also listen to two different variants.
Nice.
So before we had play source, which is the original that Peter was playing. But the play target actually is referring to the compilation that Tony made.
Of all his verses.
Exactly. So if somebody else, for example, Mark, let's say you just had a wonderful voice, and I decided I'll do the work of the translation here and work with my team, but I'm going to give it to you, the golden voice, when I'm done. You can listen to what we translated and do a final recording. So that gives us some options here.
Yeah, and it also gives translation teams the option of having a single voice per book, for instance, instead of it kind of jumping around chapter by chapter or things like that. And for some folks, that's important. They want to have that continuity.
So now he's finished with that recording. It saves it and automatically now has added it to that list of entire chapter takes. So we have now a brand new take there, which is that recorded take that he did. Now he's playing that back for us. Another thing that the editing software that Ocean Audio allows us to do is we might have multiple contributors, and their waveforms, some might be really loud, some might be soft. That would be a tool that allows us to actually kind of normalize them, make them even experience across there, whether it be the same speaker or multiple chapters or even different books. So it allows us to take advantage of those tools to give us features that Orature doesn't have built in.
And again, that's intentional because that level of functionality already exists in the marketplace, and it might not be something that our translators would be comfortable using.
So just like any of the takes we made, Tony was demonstrating that we can play that back. Now, unlike the compiled chapter where it knows where all the verses are, when we do a recording of an entire chapter, we actually don't know where the verse markers are, right? Because you read it. I don't know where your verse starts and begins. So we provide a tool here where you can actually play it back and tell the software, by the way, where does the verse marker belong? Once again, we provide the text here so that you can hear as it's rolling along where that goes. Now, oops, he just made a mistake. Did you see that? He put a verse marker in the middle of a phrase.
I did.
I think he's going to, yeah, I hope so too. I wouldn't approve that. You also don't have to do it while it's rolling. You can go ahead and hit that pause button down below and then, do some minutia. But I think he might have put that mistake in there on purpose. What do you think?
I wonder. Let's see. Now he's going to review his verse markers.
Yep. And what he's able to do is you can kind of scrub along. You can grab that middle there. You can even use the little chapter buttons down there that'll jump from next verse to the next one. Okay, so he sees where the marker probably needs to go. He could play that to make sure. Was that the right area? Yep, that's where it needed to go. He misplaced it. So he can just simply grab the marker and drop it there. And now the division should be correct. Now, all the way at the top of the screen in the white is the representation of the entire waveform, because we're only seeing a portion of it in that major screen in the middle.
Yeah, about 10 seconds, I think, in the lower bar and the whole chapter in the top bar, something like that.
Yep, pretty close. Yep.
So you can scrub around and check things out.
Indeed. And so now he's finished putting those verse markers in there. Okay, you can stop now there. So I hope we were able to kind of show that you can actively use Orature even right now to do translation work without even having to wait for the next big mass features that we'll be adding this summer.
Yeah. So really, let's talk a little bit about what's coming and what's not there now. So what's not there now is the ability to chunk a chapter for yourself. You're constrained to basically either doing it by verse or doing it by chapter. Is that correct?
Yes, and. So if we think about the 4 steps of mass, so the first part, there will be dedicated sections toward the consume.
Okay.
Listen to the whole chapter at a time. Listen to it a number of times if you need to. And then moving on to the next phase, which is, hey, great, you've now consumed that chapter. Let's talk about it. What were the key points? What are the things that we need to make sure are in our translation before even getting to the next section, which would be the chunking?
Yeah.
And that, like you said, is very individualized. What I declare as how much I can hold in my head and try to repeat back is going to be different for you.
Right.
But it actually uses the same kind of interface as the verse markers. It allows you to go through and listen to the audio and predetermine where you want to make your own chunks. And then when we come back to this interface, if you imagine where we said, here's verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, now it'd say chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3, as defined by you.
Yeah, and instead of having a known number of verses, you'd be able to basically put as many chunks in there as you want.
Yep.
So I think I heard you say that currently you can't play back the whole chapter of source audio in the current interface, or you can?
Oh, you can, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I was implying that there will be dedicated phases to following the mass methodology that'll be very clear and very familiar to those who are actually taking at an event, for example. If they were taking training there, they would seem very familiar because that would be the thing they just learned probably that day. And so the software would reflect that.
Nice. That's really good, and I'm very excited. And we're hoping for a summer release for those features.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Indeed.
Okay. Good. Glenn, is there more video here from Tony that we're interested in? Or is that about it?
I think that's about it. I was just going to kind of show off the fact that what we hadn't done before was that you could actually play back the whole compilation of verses as a chapter. We didn't necessarily show that off in there in the interest of time. We needed to kind of move along. But yeah, certainly when you make that draft of your complete chapter from the individual verses, you can listen to that. And what I was going to point out during that time, of course, is that it doesn't sound as natural. Right? When you're doing a verse by verse, you give yourself a little bit more breath at the beginning and the end and that kind of stuff. And so it's a little bit rough, and that's why you want to go back later and actually make a good recording of your entire chapter when you're done.
That's right, yeah. It takes some effort because somebody who's going to do that actually has to listen to it and really memorize it and be ready to recite it a whole chapter at a time. So yeah. Well, Glenn, that's really exciting. Should we check and see if we've got any questions from the crowd?
Thank you.
All right. So our producer extraordinaire, is indicating there are no questions at the moment. We'll give it another minute in case anybody has questions to submit those. So we've talked about what's coming on the roadmap. We've talked about Midsummer. If somebody wants to take a look at Orature right now, wants to get exposure to it, maybe even has a project in mind for it, what's the best way for somebody to get Orature?
If you go to BibleTranslationTools.org, there's an entire page dedicated to Orature, as well as our other tools. And as of our last show, we actually have the Orature 1.0 up there, which you're free to download, take it for a spin, use it if you wish. It's in continual development, of course, but that's our latest release that's out there, while we're still working on internal builds that have a lot of cool features.
Yeah, and we have, I think, made a bunch of bug fixes over the winter as the volunteers have been working with the software extensively.
They're really good at finding bugs, can I just tell you?
Well, you throw a dozen people onto it and have them all start recording and checking and all those things. It does definitely reveal the dark and dusty corners of the software, doesn't it?
I really appreciate that, because what they find is things that we don't have, is work that is saved from the field. They get a refined product.
Yeah, very much so. Anything, David? All right, no questions, which, as I always say, means we've either completely lost the crowd or we've explained it so well there's nothing left to ask. We've already answered everything. So Glenn, great to see you. Our next software showcase, which is not scheduled yet, but it'll be coming in the next month or 6 weeks, I think is going to be focused on cybersecurity, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that is the plan.
Yeah, so we're planning to have Matt Gerber in the studio. It may require both of us to get him down here, but I think we can do it. He's pretty tough and wiry, but I think between the two of us, maybe David will kick in as well. We'll get him in here and talk about cybersecurity.
It'll be good to see him again, too.
It will be good to see him again.
Yep.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today for the Software Showcase. If you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Tell your friends about it. We'd love to have people outside of the Wycliffe Associates family using our tools. All the tools are free and open source, and we produce them to help the global church, and we want as many people to use them as possible. Whether it's the source audio that they can use to listen to, whether it's Orature or our other tools, they're all free, and we want the global church to have access to them. We want to use them so that they can enjoy having Scripture in their own heart language. So we'll see you next time.
It's great to be back, and we look forward to seeing you real soon.
Thanks, Glenn. Bye-bye.